All right, so we're episode number 6 of big discussions or conversations in a little campervan, and I'm joined today by Becks Smith. Becks is a vet up in the Manitoto. Becks, is that right?
Yep, Ranfurly.
Ranfurly, and I met Becks at a event that Peter Barrett and I held at Lundgren Station a few weeks or about a month ago now, and I was really intrigued by some comments that Becks made throughout the day as a vet practitioner, and I was inspired by what she had to say, so I thought I'd better get her on the show. And so, Becks, how about you go ahead and introduce yourself for us?
Yeah, cool. So, I'm Becks Smith. I live and work in Ranfurly, Central Otago, and I guess I've been doing this job now for 10 years. I live on a sheep, beef and deer farm with my husband, and we've got 2 kids, 2 wee girls, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. So, pretty busy life, but love to keep challenging myself.
Wicked. And how have you been finding, we're all still in lockdown for another week or so, Becks. How's it all been in your household?
Yeah, so I mean, as we've sort of discussed before, Jono, it was a crazy start to lockdown. We had a positive case at work, so we were all positive contact tracing. So had to isolate within my bubble for it was about 10 days all up. So that was a bit challenging. There's a whole lot going on mentally in that stage, working through that process. But we got out the other side of that, and as an essential service, vets are still working. So I'm still, I work 2 days a week, so on the tools 2 days a week, and then at home on the farm with the family for the rest. It's been good. It's a nice chance to actually take a step back and I guess reconnect with our farm and our family and what we do, and also do a bit of sort of personal development on broadening the mind and seeing where that takes you.
Yeah, isn't it profound that you and I should meet very, very similar sort of spaces at the moment in life?
Yeah, it is. It's crazy, and I think it's all about it's the magic of connection, and that happens. You find yourself just challenging your thoughts, meeting different people, and I think the more you step outside of that comfort zone and like to meet different people with differing viewpoints and have those conversations and being brave to have those conversations, it's really enriching. You discover a whole lot of new connection in your life and grow from that.
I'd love to come back to that discussion, Becks, around the mind and the tricks it gets up to, but I want to hear from you. 10 years in the industry, that's not nothing. And what are some things for you, some milestones or key points within your career where you were sort of left with either a moment of like, aha, that's really interesting, or like a click, or perhaps the opposite end of the spectrum where something perhaps didn't quite sit with you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I guess pretty early on as I have worked my whole career other than OE here in Ranfurly. So done sort of 9 of the 10 years in the same clinic here in Ranfurly, and did a year over in the UK. The first couple of years as a new graduate, you're just learning. You're like a sponge, you're massively just soaking up all the knowledge from your mentors around you and trying to do the best job you can do for your clients. I guess sort of some aha moments for me were, to start looking at preventative healthcare versus being ambulance at the bottom cliff moments. And there, that sort of broadens the way you look at farming and, the whole farm system and how you can impact that. And I guess another couple of points that were real pivotal moments for me were being encouraged to get involved in leadership training. And so doing that through my workplace and then carrying on that on a sort of my own personal journey, it's made me have a whole new respect for where this job can take me, and that power of leadership and actually, the impressions you can leave on other people, and also, figuring out your purpose in life and why you're sort of here. And it's been a crazy journey. Who knew that, just wanting to be a vet would lead me down a whole snowballing kind of road to leadership and my purpose, and it's kind of cool.
It's super cool, and it's super it is literally what has brought on this discussion in our interactions thus far, is literally your demonstration of leadership at that field day. Like, you weren't visible so much in the group of, we had quite a few people there, but as soon as you spoke up, I was just like, wow, like, this woman is up to something. She's, really demonstrating what she's up to through her language, and she's really presenting it in a way that's like encapsulating, and you can tell that you're how passionate and driven. And it's something that is very important, but also is extremely lacking out there in the community. So it's fantastic to know that we're in good company.
Yeah, thanks, John. I really appreciate that. I mean, it's taken a lot of work, like, to have the courage to stand up and show that and to be with that conviction of my own self has taken a lot of work. So I encourage people to get there, and I'm still learning every day. But I think it really comes down to people having the bravery to take that deep dive and find out what's important to them. And also, to work on what they value and what that means. And I know that, it's only in the last couple of years or so, a whole combination's come together of, I used to fragment my life, and I used to be working on, I've always been really connected with the land and connected with sustainability. I guess I just hadn't really put it into words. And I've always been, quite science-based and evidence-based with my veterinary background. And then also so much passion for my family and our farm and what we do. And I think, it took actually, I've just done the Agri-Women's Development Trust Escalator program, and it took that year and that really, really deep dive commitment into actually what I want to do and who I am as a person and why I've done everything in my life to date, to realize that, you can actually combine all of them, and it's about exploring that sustainable change and inspiring other people. And I don't know what that looks like, and I just certainly don't have, a 10-point list of goals of how I'm going to exhibit that leadership, but it's just having the courage to have those conversations and the conviction in yourself.
Yeah, it's almost I'm all about future-based language and future-based learning. So it's like you've got a vision in your head of what the future is going to look like. You don't really know how you're going to get there, but all of your actions are just perfectly correlated to that future that you've created, whether it be in your head. Most of the time, I recommend people actually get into, language about it, so it's actually real. But and then you've of course got that accountability. So it's like, right, I've gone and stepped out there, I've put the toes in the water, and now what we're going to do is figure out the way to get there. And talking to other people brings other people along. They get to really not only hear from you what it is that you're creating, but they get to really get a sense of the passion and behind it, such that you get all these people coming on board, and you think, I'm speaking for myself personally here, I get all these people that come along, and it's like, wow, it blows me away, because really, the futures that certainly I'm creating, and that I can hear from you and what you're sharing about what you're creating, is actually we do need other people involved. Like, that diversity is just so crucial. And so to be out there communicating that in the community, all of a sudden all these people pop up, like this conversation right now, and it's like, how on earth is all this happening?
Yeah, I don't know. And it's exactly as it's how it comes back to what you're talking about that diversity. And it's, I think, diversity is something that we really, really need in our lives right now. And it's whether it's, you're talking, I like to think about a lot in the sustainable space. And I'm doing a course on corporate sustainability at the moment. And it's, when you're looking at sustainability from an environment, from a people and community, and from a business point of view, if you think, it all comes back to diversity. And the second we start encouraging diversity in each parts of our, the economy, of our people and community, and like the environment, if you put diversity into every one of those little corners, it really, really opens up and broadens people's perspective. And the opportunities become so much more enriching. Yeah.
Cool.
It's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah. And so, Becks, you came along to a field day that we had at Lundgren Station, and you've been working at Lundgren Station for, how long have you been sort of dealing with Peter Barrett for?
I'm trying to think when Peter came back to the farm. So I've been dealing with Lundgren Station since I started my job here 10 years ago. So through different managers that have been there, and then Peter returning home, yeah, I've been working with Lundgren.
So that's almost perfect, flowing on to the next question. What's been, and not just at Lundgren, but anyone else that's, while we're on the diversity subject, we'll go into animal health, in the respect of animals that have access to diverse forage, so diverse species pastures. But have you noticed much of a shift, coming from pre-Peter being at Lundgren to Peter coming in, changing the dynamic a little bit? What's been your views, because you sort of touched on it at the field day, what's been your views of, were there any surprises for you? Had you experienced anything like that before Lundgren?
No, I hadn't. So Lundgren was definitely my first, I guess, exposure to the regenerative agriculture principles. And so, I learned a lot in conversations with both Peter and Gareth about, what it entails. And they gave me some books to read just to give me a bit of background, because I did a lot of work early on and trying to sort of align my thinking and what I could offer them with what they were trying to achieve in their goals. So yeah, it was cool. It was coming on side early on at just actually appreciating what they were trying to achieve in their farming business. And then I guess it was just, getting further into that and looking at the outcomes and looking at what they were achieving, what they were excited about. I was like, hey, this is quite cool. And it's actually, taking the time to think about that a bit more and thinking about, what do these diverse forages and pasture species mean to animal health. And I've probably done a bit more thinking about that in the last couple of weeks as to, what is animal health and what is that offering animals. And then it's also around, okay, so from an animal health perspective, where do we see negative impacts on animal health from their diet? And I think we touched on this at the field day, is that, when we get a lot of nutritional animal health problems, we actually do, in a way, it's just framed differently, fix them by offering diversity. So, when we're looking at acidosis and we're looking at pulpy kidney, and we're looking at nitrate toxicity, sort of those animal health problems, we encourage people to offer diversity in the rumen environment. So, are we all really that far off track and wanting different end goals? Probably not. How we frame it and how we word it is probably just the difference there, and actually how far along the journey we are to achieving them. But it's definitely challenged my thinking of traditional animal health models, and I'm sort of, at the moment, I'm really, really looking to explore that space and actually, validating that and putting, I guess, some framework around what I think could be a really exciting project in future.
Yeah, of course, because it's one thing to observe something, even with data like weight gain and like dry matter requirements and things like that are really easy to measure. But when we get into the complexity of, the rumen in the animal's gut and what are the actual effects, we understand some aspects of quorum sensing, the phenomenon of microbial diversity and communication, but there's another level, how do we go about generating confidence for farmers beyond just observation and, hey, this is a great move? Because it's something that I get hit with all the time, in my experience before I went out as a coach and consultant when I was managing, when I was at Harts Creek Farm. And the last year I was there, so this farm was certified organic. We used to run 1,600, 1,800 store lambs a year. And although we were organic and we fed sort of medium diversity, 8 to 10 species in our pastures, we still had quite a bit of burden around, worms. And when I shifted the management to increase the density and then focused on recovery, so having more frequent shifts, and then there was another element to this, as I threw in stock humates, so lignite as an ad lib Just I was looking at it to balance the CN ratios, because to me I was feeding all nitrogen, there was bugger all carbon. And so the last year at Harts Creek, we've seen a profound increase in resilience to parasites. And even when we were doing fecal egg counts, the fecal egg counts were saying that it might have been, right on the threshold of traditional, taking action. We didn't, and everything was just fine. And so that was my first sort of aha moment to, okay, so diversity and management can drastically improve the animal's resilience. But then, and then now I get people coming in when I'm talking about this stuff, and they want to know more data. They want to know how that happens. And it's tricky because the data is not really there beyond, mineral data around ratios of minerals. That's quite simple stuff, but there's a lot more going on, as you'll be quite aware.
Yeah, and I think it's really important what you're sort of leaning towards there, is that how you bring people along the journey who have different values and different degrees of risk aversion, right? So like there are so many people out there who are really, really willing to take a risk and leap based on what they hear and what they see and a gut feel. And then there's another, there's so many people who really have a higher risk aversion, and they need proof, right? It needs to be in data, and they watch their neighbors do it. And, to the extreme where there's those late adopters where it takes a long time to get adoption change. And I think what is really important is that how we get people on the journey and how we, I guess, broaden the offering to be able to talk to people with different values and different ways of adoption. And I think it's that, yes, you say the data is really sort of lacking, or it's hard. Like, it's hard to get validated data on these things, especially in complex systems. I think New Zealand's really unique in its positioning, and that we have some of the best animal scientists in the world, and we have multiple universities offering really, really high caliber scientific research. And I think, the power is really there for the taking, where we've got people doing amazing things on farms. We've got amazing animal scientists behind us. And I think we've got, New Zealanders have quite, an innovative sort of mindset. And I think, if we combine all of them, then we might be able to really take more people along a journey that actually appeals to people with different values. And yeah, I think that's the really important next step, is how can we get some, good validated data to reach out to people who have different values for adoption.
I'll just jump in here and say what's coming is some really cool people front-footing, leading this search and striving for data. But what's also really important is we've got to remember that, and sometimes I've got mixed feelings about data, right? So I used to be really analytical. I call it now analytical, because people get too fixated on the data. Some people are just so hell-bent for data. But in my experience in the last few years, and some interactions I've had with some really high caliber scientists and entomologists and ecologists, is actually, data in some cases can be quite limiting depending on the context. So historically, our science has been quite, reductionistic and linear. And so when I come along and I'm saying to people, for instance, on a large scale dairy farm that I work with, several $1 million worth of dairy cows, and we're chucking them into 21 species, of which there's some brassicas that at the time of grazing was flowering. And I remember people coming to me like, you can't put dairy cows on flowering brassicas, you'll kill them. And sorghum Sudan's another one. So sorghum on its own, can provide some toxicity to an animal, but what's missing is the context. So for instance, we can prove anything we like. You've just got to follow the relative investment. And so this is where it's really important that we be careful with how we go about, carrying out the science, and also who's behind it. So at the moment, I've got some people who are privately funding some research coming out of Otago University to validate what we're seeing on farms. So I'm really excited about that. But also I've got this inner battle at the moment to the way in which I like to teach, and I'm sure you'll appreciate this, Bex, is like having people be fully responsible for the choices they made because they believe in them. You know, they've had an introduction, they've had a conversation, and that's why these conversations are so important, because people get to sense something that they didn't know existed. And people can look at peer-reviewed papers and it doesn't give you that. You know, it doesn't give you that. It doesn't give you it's a bit like throwing microbes in with your minerals. Minerals are great on their own, but without microbes, they're nothing. So like for us, data is really good, but without the inspiration, what good is data? So I've got this.
So it's about that connection, isn't it? It's connection, it's the story, and it's the journey, right? So you've got to initially form that, you know, that connection, that real human feel to it. Like these are people like us, and then it's what's their story. And so that's where I think, you know, like you're saying, it's not just a peer-reviewed journal article. I think we're past that now, right? And it's, you know, we're seeing a lot of this values-based leadership where people, you know, there's human connection and there's a story behind it. And then it's like, how do you take people on that journey with you? And I want to welcome people to not necessarily challenge other people's thoughts. Like, don't challenge thoughts. Just think of, well, hey, can we expand thoughts? Let's not talk about challenging people. It's such a negative term. Let's just talk about expanding. And that's whether, you know, whatever side of the spectrum you're on, everyone could do with a bit of, you know, mind expansion, right? Like it's get a step out of echo chambers, start expanding your mind, and let's go on a journey. Where it leads, you know, who knows?
Yeah. There are no sides, Bex. It's like, you know, how long do we get in these discussions of, you know, agreeing or disagreeing, or, you know, left wing, right wing? It's like, you know, what's required, because I sort of, I'm reminded of a really cool, it's not quite a quotation, but it was a speaker that I listened to quite a bit, and he was talking about, you know, it's like we're all on a train, and the people on the left side are all saying, you know, over here on the left side, we've got this belief, and everybody ought to come over to the left side. And then all the people on the right-hand side are saying, well, something quite similar, but except they're right, and everyone ought to come over to their side. But all the while, the train's going where it's going, and actually deciding which side you're on doesn't actually achieve anything. And what's required is getting out of the train, or that, you know, you talked about it in echo chamber, and getting out in front of the train and laying down a bit of new track, which is not comfortable. And so it does take something, doesn't it, to branch out of, well, and also, sorry to butt in, Bex, but for me in my journey of learning, there was a moment, and it was like day and night, the moment that I stopped making people wrong and judging. So the moment I stopped doing that, all of a sudden there's all this space to just listen, and it's hard to teach. You can't really teach it. You've got to have at least come to the realization of the effect of being attached to being right. And so once you let that go, all of a sudden you can just listen to something. You're not sitting there deciding whether you agree with it or not, or whether you need to come in with your 2 cents. And man, I've noticed that, like, people say, well, what have you studied and what have you learned? And literally, I've not studied at all. I've just listened from a space of everyone is valid.
Yeah, it's that, I guess it's that, like you say, it's just getting curious. It's about leaning into something that maybe you don't know much about, or maybe it's something you do know a lot about, and just going, okay, I'm curious about someone else's viewpoint on something. And it's, you know, it's about, I guess it's that really old, you know, if you want to bring it back to set terms, it's that knower's mindset versus a learner's mindset. And it's about just being comfortable with saying, actually, I know nothing, but I'm really willing to learn everything, you know, like, and I want to learn, and I want to keep learning, and I want to push that horizon to actually broaden my way of thinking, because, man, that's cool. Like, that's a productive use of my day if I can think slightly differently by the end of it.
And that's how you innovate. Like, if we keep thinking thoughts that have already been thought, yes, it's comfortable and we get all the agreements and we get to have like a posse of people like, yeah, we're valid, you know, but there's something to be said for being out there and actually not challenging, but thinking freely. Like we said before, you know, you've got this future, you've got this long-term goal, you know, all these things that you listen to, all of these viewpoints, they all sort of channel in and become part of that journey, you know.
Yeah, and it's amazing what ends up once you do sort of develop that, get outside of your comfort zone. And, up here is where the magic happens, like way away from your comfortable little box. And once you get in there and you start on that journey, yeah, the puzzles of your life that fit together, it's completely unreal. I would never have thought that the complex puzzle pieces of my life would ever have fitted together in a way that I could be completely content spending 24 hours a day exploring in sort of one place. Yeah.
And then you get to be fluid when something happens. You're not stuck. You're not like, ooh, you can just, yeah, we'll just go around that. And someone like yourself, who's obviously, accredited and certified in what you're doing, to hear you say then, and I love this so much, is like, really we know nothing. And so what can you do with nothing? Anything.
Exactly. And it's, I think it's just as long as your intentions are good, then get curious and get out there and get asking questions and form these connections with people like yourself. Like, this is cool, just explore that. There's no agenda in mind. It's actually just about exploring, human connection and human mindset.
That's what so with Quorum Sense, the group that I created in 2018, when we had some of the early field days, and they started to get bigger, 50, 60 people in the early days would come along, and people would come to me like, oh, what's the agenda? And I always say there is none. And with that, it's like people use the word digress, and to me there's no such thing. There's just there's just the conversation and the way it goes. And when there's no rigidity in a conversation, likes of, if you want to be really clean cut and precise in your conversations, that's great, but don't expect any great new innovations. So what we did was we just would have farm field days, and all these people would come, and we'd just let the conversation roll. And sometimes we'd be there for 5 hours. The only problems there were that all of a sudden it would be from one discussion to 6 individual discussions, which isn't all that effective for likes of recording our conversations or, documenting discussions had, because it just gets a bit tricky. But when you've got no agenda, just a common goal, and then you've got this diversity of people, it's crazy the discussions that come up.
Yeah, and it's really cool. It's it's creating that white space, isn't it? Without an agenda, you create white space, and in white space you get really, really cool things coming out. And I think that's, partly I'm hoping that's one of the outcomes of this lockdown period, right? So a lot of people have had a lot more white space to think, and I certainly know I have, even though I've still been working. But it's really allowed a little bit more white space and like you say, just more conversations in a more diverse manner. And the things that come out of just following a curiosity in that white space, whether it be conversations at a field day or just, time alone yourself, following that curiosity and letting a conversation or a thought, even just one thought, just actually follow its course. It's amazing what the endpoint you might end up at is. And, is that even an endpoint? It might just be a parked idea for another day, and then you'll end up going off on the journey again.
White space. I've never thought of it like that before. It makes so much sense.
Mm-hmm. It's like opening up a page in a book and just a blank page, and it's like, where do you go with that? I don't know. And those conversations you have with people when you haven't set an agenda, I find that even in my daily work, you do the job and you'll be finished a job, and it's actually the importance of that conversation at the end of a job where you've got no agenda, you're not, on the clock anymore, and you find out more about people and their systems and their interests and passions, or you might just talk about the weather. You never know where that white space is going to go, but that's where some of the most interesting conversations I have in my daily work come from. It's just that wee 10-minute chat at the end of a call that can sometimes turn into like 40 minutes.
The 40-minute goodbye.
Yeah.
But also just on that, we've touched on speaking, we've touched on communication, but you've brought up another point beautifully, and that's listening and being heard. So, for your farmers, and I have this with my clients, and, the way in which I educate and coach people was very different. And, and some farmers think we digress, but we never do. It's always perfect, and to me, farming, it doesn't matter what your industry is, really. To me, like, if you're really passionate about what you're doing, it involves your whole life. And it's interesting because we often talk about the impact of our work life on our home life, which is completely valid. I've been there, but we also don't talk about the impact of our, if we're going to create that distinction, or have two separate worlds, then we've also got to be conscious of there's actually another, it does go the other way too. So when people are dealing with stuff at home, it will affect their work. And sometimes just giving someone that space to express what's going on, that's why I sort of like to consider that there is no line, there is no separation. But when there is, just having that space for someone to actually just say what's up for them, and then all of a sudden they get the opportunity to have the white space for themselves, because they're really, like, just thinking out loud right now, Bex, can you have white space when you're in turmoil, or,
Yeah, I don't know. That's a really interesting point. I guess, yeah, I mean, like you, I do a bit of mentoring at work, and so I work with a lot of people within our company, and it's that definitely, I always say to my junior staff, as we're learning and we're going along the journey with dealing with, maybe some adversity or a challenge they're facing, you say, you never know, like, everybody's got something else going on below the surface, right? You actually have no idea what is going on inside someone's head. And, their response is their responsibility. And so there's a whole lot of other stuff going on, and you can't predict how much of an impact someone's home life is having on their work life. Like you say, work-life balance, it goes both ways. And so I think it's really important to remind people that everybody's got something going on. And I guess the degree that impacts their life is so dependent on the individual as well. Like, what you think might not be important is massively important to someone else. And it's the whole spectrum. I love that. It's an interesting point, that can you have white space in turmoil? I think, I don't know, maybe that's kind of come to the root of what people are working on to increase well-being now. So much more, mindfulness, meditation, and gratitude practice. Maybe that right there is the key to creating white space in turmoil. You actually have to put in place, as unstructured as I am, you do have to put in place some sort of structure to create white space. And I think, when I get busy and I end up like the hamster on the wheel, because it happens, I know the first things I drop are things like my yoga practice, my meditation, my gratitude journaling. What are the things that probably make the most difference to my actual, well-being and creating that white space is my yoga practice, my meditation, and my journaling. So, it's the first thing that okay, something's not quite right here. The balance is feeling a bit out of kilter. Hey, when was the last time you actually just got on the yoga mat, or, took some time to do some gratitude journaling? And I found that has been one of the biggest things to sort of pull me back and center me into having that white space to think again. Yeah. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. And perhaps better said, Bex, maybe not turmoil, because turmoil, it leaves a lot open. You can hit a wall in life and be as calm as anything. You can have turmoil and peace. I actually think you can, but you cannot have white space you cannot have white space with righteousness. You can't have white space with bitterness, with resentment, with self-doubt, with stress, all those things. So you did right. If you can come back to being grounded in yoga, meditation. I'm 21 days into my first ever go at meditation. I tell you what, it's been really something.
Yeah, it is. And yoga and meditation and gratitude journaling isn't everyone's cup of tea, right? And I don't for a second think that it's going to suit everyone, but I think everyone needs to find that one thing in their day that grounds them and connects them. It's whether you're going for a run, it's whether you're going for a walk, even, some people paint and draw and, photography. It's that, what is that one thing in your day that can ground you, center you, and allow you to into that flow state, or some sort of state where you're just not preoccupied by your stress, your busyness. You've got to create, you've got to actually force the space. It's not easy to start with. You actually have to push out the sides of the busyness in your mind to create the white space.
And you know all about it when you're there, right? Like when you start, because it's funny you talk about journaling, because I realize that this is actually part of the thing. So I'm up to date. This is day 19. I had to write down a list of 10 things under each segment. So I love that I have da-da-da. I love that I am able to da-da-da. And I love the way I am da-da-da-da-da. And that was day 19. I noticed in the meditations getting up towards that third week was they were a whole lot more quiet. Like there was never such thing as, like when they said in the voiceover thing is like, go to that place of quiet. And I'm like, hang on a minute. What is quiet in this bloody thing up here? Day 19, Becks, I reckon I'm starting to feel that quiet. And it's almost the point where when the end bell goes after the 10 minutes of just quiet sounds in the background, I'm like not ready to, I'm not done. I want to keep going now.
Yeah, it is. It becomes quite addictive, eh? Like that feeling of quiet it's a really cool place. And as a busy working farming mum, like honestly, finding that quiet is hard some days. They say, you're starting to get to a quiet place and you're like, oh God, what am I cooking for tea? And where are the kids? And what am I going to do tomorrow? And oh God, has anyone hang out the washing? Like, it's like, go away. I'm trying to find a quiet place. Yeah. It's hard work, but I think it's powerful to do, and I think a lot of people do it more than they realize, but maybe it's not in a formal setting of I'm going to sit down and meditate on the floor with nice music playing in the background. It's like people meditate. I think even farmers, like there's some form of, if you enter that flow state, even on the tractor feeding out, if you're like finding that's a really peaceful place for you and your mind goes to a really quiet space, then maybe that is your white space. A lot of people find it out running. Physical exercise is a really good one because you can't, your body's preoccupied, it's sort of busy, but your mind doesn't have to be, so you can enter that white space that way. So I think I encourage everyone to find their own white space, wherever that might be.
Yeah, it's almost like getting you out of the way, and we do that with mindfulness and stillness, so I'm learning. But when I think back to my days of racing motorbikes and adventure off-road, is actually back then, I'd like to be able to say I was a runner, but there were moments, and actually I was a tennis player and a squash player, when you're in the zone with a sport or an activity, just thinking about it now, it is dead silent. Like I'm just making that realization right now, because it's quite something, sitting here feeling like I've never had that peace before, but just right now it's occurred to me that actually I've had that plenty of times, but it's in moments of like heightened focus, like to the point where, like when you're in the moment, or like maybe it's like, I can only put it back to like my motorbike racing days, when you're like in the zone and you've got someone say right in front of you and you're just on their tail, there's nothing going on, the world is just completely silent, and you're just, that flow state's it comes in many different forms, doesn't it?
Yeah, for real. It's like that singular focus, right? Like, so if there's a singular focus that kind of your whole being is working towards, the clutter can't get in. It can't get there. So that's what I say to people, like how you find your flow or your white space is not necessarily going to be like from the textbook way of sitting down cross-legged on the floor. It's like, as you say, it's out on a motorbike. It's doing something that takes a whole lot of focus on the physical you, can allow your mind to not be cluttered by the trivial stuff.
I couldn't cross my legs 3 weeks ago.
How's it going now?
I'm pretty sore in the thigh area. I have to put 3 pillows up to get my bum up high enough so that I can cross my legs, but I'm getting there.
Yeah, cool. Hey, it's all work in progress, eh?
That's right. Becks, I want to hear from you. What's your future looking like? So you've got some young children, you've got a farm, you're a vet. Like, holy moly, what's sort of on the cards? What's next for Becks?
Oh, I don't know. I said to myself after doing Escalator that I just wanted to give myself almost like that white space. I wanted to give myself a chance to think and explore and see what my future could look like. Yeah, I don't know. I'm making it every day. Just, yeah, for me, the main priority is, keep curious, keep learning, and keep exploring. I'd really like to, for me, it's all about how, my leadership why is to inspire sustainable change from the ground up. How I put that into place, how I embody that, I don't know yet. It's all a work in progress, but it's all about that connections, getting curious and keeping connected with my earth. So I have absolutely no idea, Jono, and I'm totally comfortable with that.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, but and also, I get caught up in I don't get caught up in. I talk a lot about, creating futures and stuff, but to remain grounded, to remain fully present in a life that's, as full on as yours, like that really takes something.
Yeah, I think I try and do sort of things every day that keep you grounded. So it's every day I try and make a connection with someone, whether that's someone new or someone in my past or someone present. It's that connection. You try and every day try and do something active outdoors because I know that it sort of fuels me. And, it's about keeping family forefront and, I don't know, keeping it real. I'm just a normal everyday mum out there working and farming and exploring possibility.
And what would you have to say for people that are finding themselves overwhelmed with the juggling act that is, working and children and I'm not saying mothers because, fathers out there involved as well. What would you give to them? What would you say to them through your journey of just that, working all that out? What are some key points that you'd like to have people hear from yourself?
God, facing the juggle. I think it's the really important thing is actually figuring out what's really important. If the dishes don't get done, or if the housework doesn't get done, or the washing doesn't get done, or nobody dies. And it's about what's really important is making those valued connections and being present with your family. And you do your job to the best of your ability, but at the end of the day, I would, you don't regret the time spent with family and the time spent on connection and time spent on yourself, because at the end of the day, you have to be, okay to be there for your family. So it's about really looking after yourself, looking after your family, and the rest kind of just falls into place, hopefully. At the end of the day, you might regret the time that you forced aside your family and you forced aside those connections to achieve corporate goals or things like that. But you'll never regret the things that are truly important to you. So, work out what those things are to you and follow your values and trust yourself. I think it's really important that people trust the gut, trust what's important to you. And take time for yourself, because at the end of the day, you need to be okay to be able to serve the people you love around you.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I was one of those guys, one of those fathers that the dishes had to be done, like everything had to be done. My wife at the time was the same, and I put my career to the forefront, and look, I'll never get those years back. Like, I remember looking back now, there'd be times I'd come home, my children would be up at the window waiting for me, and I'd see them and I'd think, oh my God, that's so wonderful. But really, I was still caught up in what work needed to be done, what did I have to do at home, and I was just so not there for them. And they don't care about the dishes, and they don't care about, what's going on at work. And knowing this didn't help me get over that busyness. And actually now I'm laughing because I'm looking back. My twin sister, she has two beautiful children, one of whom's autistic, and they've had, her and her husband, they've had, a lot of, it's been really something, their son starting school, and, he was a running risk, and he struggled with language. But, and so they've had all sorts they've had to deal with. They've both worked throughout. My sister has always worked full time and been a mum. I don't know how she did it. And back in my years of thinking that I was the man with my job and my house and my tidiness, but the stress levels were through the roof. I used to judge my sister on her untidiness, like it was bad or wrong. And when I look at her and her family, they are loving, they are connected, and really, like, I had no idea, like, who on earth was I to judge? And what they've been able to deal with as a family is like, wow. And you did right. Nobody dies if the dishes don't get done.
I hope not.
I'm telling you this right now.
I definitely think it's people following, it's never, sometimes it is hard work, but it's easier to follow what's important, right? So it's easier to do all those things if they're truly important to you. And it's, so you've got to just figure out where you put your focus. And that's amazing, like that story of what she's, achieved, and your realization, I guess, of that, what actually made a difference at the end of the day. It's pretty powerful. And I think it's that the really other important thing is to forgive yourself. Like, it's like, if you actually be kind on yourself, if you don't get all those things done in a day, or if you have a day where you prioritize work over family, or the other way around, it's like, forgive yourself, acknowledge it, go, yeah, that happened. Get curious about it. Love getting curious about things. And say, why did it happen? But then let it go. Like, go, okay, that happened. Tomorrow's a new day. Forgive yourself. And, it's amazing. You talk about kids and their capacity to forgive. Your kids just do, right? Like, they wake up every day and it's a brand new day of curiosity, and they really don't remember what happened yesterday or where your priorities lay 5 minutes ago. They're all absorbed in the moment and being present. And it's that beautiful childhood innocence that I think we all need to remember, is actually get over yourself and what you did 5 minutes ago. Just be present and they'll forgive you. It's fine.
Is it Elsa off Frozen that's, let it go?
Yeah.
Awesome, Bex. Well, hey, look, I want to wrap it up there and just thank you for your time hanging out with me today. It's been super cool. Who would have thought our conversation would have gone in that direction?
Yeah, I know. It's great, eh? Like, that's the power of human connection and good chat.
And no agenda.
No agenda, that white space, that space to explore where the conversation goes. That's cool.
Yeah, we got it. Okay, Bex, thanks again for your time. Keep up the great work up there in Ranfurly, and I'm going to be coming and going from there up at Lundgren quite a bit in the foreseeable future. So no doubt we'll catch up again soon.
Yeah, no doubt. It'll be great. Definitely once the lockdown's lifted and we sort of get to intermingle again, it'd be really cool to catch up and see, where our other white space conversations can go.
Yeah, what has this opportunity brought us?
Who knows? We'll wait and see.
Thanks, Bex.
Perfect. See you later, Jono. Bye.